John Singer Sargent is renowned to be one of the best portrait painters of all time, but what makes his work so exceptional? I travelled through his footsteps, I studied his private letters and lived by his rules for 30 days to find out. And what I discovered wasn't just about brushstrokes or technique, it was about something far more fundamental to mastery. Some people would say you can't learn to paint like Sargent in just 30 days when it took him a whole lifetime. And they're right, but that's not what this experiment is really about. I'm going to show you exactly what happened when I stopped just copying his work and instead actually tried to live as he would have lived. This is about uncovering the real habits and mindset that made him one of history's greatest portrait painters. Everything I did was based on his documented approach to art, and what I learned changed everything I thought I knew about becoming a master painter. And you may be surprised to see that I'm not even starting with painting, but instead drawing. In the academy that Sargent trained at, there seemed to be a heavy emphasis on drawing and not just painting. As he would travel to different places, he would document everything he saw through these sketches. But despite doing so many sketches, he never actually started a painting with a sketch. He just went straight in to build the forms using paint, which I am a wee bit nervous about. He also used to study the old masters, and I always wonder if he ever realised that he would become a master that people would study. Maybe we'll become masters that people will study. Maybe not. To get the most accurate painting, Sargent would stand up, so we won't be needing this. I'm going to start off by studying some of Sargent's work, and whilst he did not copy from pictures, he would use a real life model, I really want to see how he did his brushstrokes, so I'm first starting off by just emulating the style. When you're painting this way, where you're going in without an outline, you first want to just get the general shape of the face and then mark in a few key points. Eyebrows, nose, corners of the eyes, and then you can start to build up forms of the face using shadows. This is arguably the most important part, which is exactly why you see me scrubbing it out here, because I wasn't entirely happy with it, and if your base sketch and proportions are wrong, it's going to be really difficult to fix it later, so best fix it early on. One of his pupils mentioned that he held it as an impossible task for a painter to repaint a head where the understructure was wrong, and that is why he would often repaint it a dozen times. I've noticed that I have already started trying to touch things up and focusing on little things when I just need to block everything in. I think I've kind of stopped myself and been like, hold on, no, I need to block all the colours in, just make sure I have the general gist of the painting before I start faffing around with details. Okay, at least I caught it. Old habits are hard to break, and my bad habit has always been to focus too hard on detail, but this is why I'm doing this, because what makes Sargent's paintings so incredible is his lack of detail. He kept things loose, especially in the early stages where you might still be making adjustments. Since much of Sargent's work was commissioned, it meant that he had to get the likeness right. To do this, he would frequently back up from his canvas to be able to get a wider view of the painting. And I absolutely love this quote. In painting a picture, he would retreat a few steps from the canvas and then once more advance with his brush balanced in his hand as though it were a rapier and he were engaged in a bout with a fencing master. In fact, he backed away from his canvas so often that there was actually footsteps marked into his carpet from the paces. I'm using thick and deliberate brushstrokes. Every single stroke should have a reason and help explain the face to the viewer even further. This master copy is by no means perfect, but I am really happy with how the likeness turned out. Capturing the way someone looks exactly in a painting is really difficult, and I really struggle with it myself. But with today's sponsor Skillshare, it's easy to learn how to do it. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creators with thousands of classes led by industry experts across film, illustration, painting, freelance productivity, and so many more. And it's not just things in creative areas that you can learn. I have an art fair coming up, and that means that I need to make a load of paintings in not too much time. And it's been a struggle to try and keep up with ideas and creativity, but Skillshare has helped massively. I took a course on how to keep your creativity high and come up with new ideas, and it's just honestly been a game changer. Now I don't have to wait for ages to think of new ideas to be able to get cracking with a painting. I can just get going because the creativity is already there. So if you want to try out Skillshare for yourself, then the first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So get started today. For my second study, I'm going to be painting the Mrs. Vickers. Now, I'm going to have to apologise in advance because I unfortunately lost like half the footage for this painting, which I'm really gutted about, and I'm really sorry that you're not going to see half the process. Just like before, I'm starting out with no sketch and just trying to block out the big shapes. I'm so happy with how that white dress turned out, so it's such a shame that I lost all that footage. So what I ended up doing was, instead of just using the same soft flat brush I had been using, for those highlight areas and those areas I wanted to highlight in the dress, I used a slightly coarser brush. This laid the paint down thicker and created some texture. The likeness of this one is definitely not as good as the last one I did, and it's almost definitely because of the teeny tiny reference photo. So a huge part of Sargent's method is being able to step back and take a look at what he's doing so he can like alter stuff while he's painting. Especially since he doesn't start with a drawing, you need to make sure that you're getting your proportions right, and you need to be changing it like while you're painting. Only problem is, I've been working super close to the canvas because the reference is so small, so I need to get close to the reference to be able to see it, and then I end up staying close and painting like that, and I think it's really messed me up on this one. I knew after this I needed to find a way to get back on track, and what better way of doing that than getting out of the studio, getting some fresh air. Sargent had a philosophy of staying curious, gaining new experiences to keep your ideas fresh. So, with sketchbook in hand, I decided to explore the historic city of Chester, from the Roman walls to the medieval buildings and every antique shop in between. I came back to the studio that night, armed with plenty of new inspiration. Walking along the ancient walls and seeing the castle ruins, it really brought me back to my childhood, where I'd watch shows about knights and castles and princesses. So you may recognise who I'm painting as the Lady Morgana from Merlin. It was one of my absolute favourite shows growing up, and it's based around the British folklore about King Arthur. I decided to do my own painting rather than just studies because copying another artist's work is quite easy. The real test is when you have to create your own, and you gotta see if you've actually learnt from those studies. Something to note here is the position of the brush in my hand. Sargent would always hold his brush right at the end rather than towards the tip. Not only to make his strokes more fluid, but also just to put more distance between him and the canvas. This adds back to the same reason why he also doesn't sit down, because the closer you are to the canvas, the less likely you are to spot mistakes, because you're not seeing the painting as a whole. Again, I was just not happy with the proportions of the face and decided to scrub it out again. And I actually took a bit of a different approach to my two other paintings. Instead of having any underpainting on the face, I just went straight in with paint. I was building the forms with shadows and light. When you're building a face in this way, you're able to see likeness long before any of the details are put in. I hadn't even put the eyes in before people on my Instagram had started guessing who it was already. And this is because what makes people identifiable is not these small details, but instead the large structure of the face. Areas like the highlighted space underneath her eyebrows, also the shape of her nose built with the shadows, it all adds to the character of the person. Looking back at this face once I had finished the painting, I actually regretted detailing it too much. I think I lost some of this nice looseness that I had in the beginning, and it looked more stiff, I think, towards the end. But I didn't want to dwell on the face too long. I was happy with the resemblance and I wanted to just move on to the fabric, which was the best part. It was so much fun. Painting in these abstract shapes and brushstrokes and then it slowly becoming a dress was really fulfilling to see. A reason why I chose this reference in particular is because of the gown that she's wearing. It looks silky and shiny, and it's really reminiscent of some of the extravagant gowns that the ladies in Sargent's paintings would wear. In places like these jewels, I kept detail to an absolute minimum, instead used the texture of the brushes to just work for me. These honestly took 10 minutes and I can't believe the result. I also managed to get one single shot of my palette here because I know everyone's always asking to see my palette, and I promise I will do a video at some point where it's a full demonstration and my palette will be visible the whole time, I promise. Because she's wearing these sheer sleeves, it alters the colour of the fabric underneath. So even though it looks to be this warm, like skin tone colour, it actually is tinted with blue. Something that I've noticed is that a lot of these master artists that we study, they all had someone tutoring them, someone behind the scenes who was helping to guide them. And for Sargent, that was Carolus Duran. But unfortunately, not all of us have the opportunity to travel to Florence or Paris to study art like the masters. I don't think you should let that set you back though. I have just started offering a one-to-one mentoring call to help you transform your art like I did mine and give you a head start in your art career. So if you would like to be one of the 2 people who gets to talk to me directly each week to gain insight and artist help, then click the second link in the description. In this painting, I was laying on the colour way thicker than I was in the master copies. Sargent would say the thicker you paint, the more the colour flows. You don't want dabs of colour, you want plenty of paint to paint with. Now, I did avoid this earlier on, mainly for budget reasons. Oil paint is very expensive, but I thought it's worth the additional cost for the look that I'm trying to go for. People would say that it looks as though Sargent would put out enough paint for like a dozen paintings. Oh gosh, I was fighting to get these hands done. They look like AI hands, they just did not look right, and there was an extra finger on one of them, and yeah, it was not good. But they ended up looking alright in the end. Trying to keep them looking soft and effortless when nothing about the process was soft or effortless was really tricky. I kept the outer edge of this fabric quite soft and blended because it's not the key focus, so I don't want to really bring attention to it with any hard lines. Anyway, allow me to present to you the finished painting.